County, and welcome to the Michael Zehr Show, coming to you from the Rising Eagle Studios here at the Warrior Healing Center in Sierra Vista, Arizona. And I'm not even looking at my watch. Today's date is July 29th. You know how I know that is because we did the service officer work yesterday, and I was typing in the date all day yesterday, so it kind of just stuck with me. I'm going to remember the date tomorrow. Today's special guest that we have in the studios is Phyllis Romero. Phyllis, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule and coming in and talking with us today. We really appreciate it.
I'm glad to be here, Mike. Thank you for offering.
And I really enjoy doing this and getting to sit down and talk with other veterans and getting to know their stories so that they can tell them and share them. And you never know, you might learn something about somebody that you didn't know. So it's always interesting to watch these. So to get started, I'd like to ask you, where was home? Where were you born and grew up?
Well, I was born in upstate New York in the west central region in the Finger Lakes area, Keuka Lake. I was born and raised there. I graduated from high school there in a small town called Penn Yan, which is a combination of two words, Pennsylvania and the Yankees. And
wow.
yeah, it's kind of a cool history.
Yeah.
And we're a big rural farming area up there. Everybody were farmers, mostly dairy, some grapes, apples, and mostly produce to support the dairy industry. But that's basically what we are up there. I grew up on a little lake, one of the Finger Lakes called Keuka Lake. And Keuka is a Seneca Indian word meaning crooked because it's shaped like a Y.
Okay.
And it's the coolest little lake. How I ended up deciding on going into the Army is a very interesting story, as are all of my stories, by the way.
Yes, they are.
So I'm one of 8 children, so I'm number 4. And when we were about 8, my parents would start honing us for moving out of the house and being on our own. So anyhow, when I was 8, my idea was I was going to grow up to be a nun, even though we weren't Catholic. We were Methodist in those days, but nun sounded like a good profession. And so I was going to be that for a while, amongst other things. And then when I turned about 15 or 16, I had already set a career path, one of two. And it was either going to be, I was going to go into computers, because they were up and coming in those days. I graduated in 1975, yes, or I was going to go into law. And so those were my two ideas, and I was going with those sophomore year, junior year, into my senior year. That was what my focus was. So in our senior year, I have a best friend. And we've been best friends at that time for about 5 years. We met when we were 12 or 13, and we're just amazing best friends. We did everything together.
To this day?
To this day.
Cool.
To this day. So we used to go to her cousin's house all the time in a town even smaller than ours with a population of 500. Well, that cousin, there was 3 boys that lived there, and they were geniuses. So the one boy that was just a little bit younger than we are, he graduated early, went into the Army at 16 or 17 into engineering, and he convinced her to go. Well, if she was going, well, then I was going to go. I was already accepted at college. I was ready to go to Buffalo to go to college. And when she decided to go in the Army, then I decided to go.
Did you enlist in the buddy program?
We enlisted in the buddy program in April of 1974, or excuse me, 1975, right? It was our senior year, and it was right at the end of the Vietnam War. So the Vietnam War ended on officially May 7th of that year, and I enlisted in April 28th. So for the purposes of veterans awareness and recognition, I'm considered a Vietnam era vet.
Wow.
And so we went in under the buddy plan. We signed up under delayed entry, went in January. At the reception station, we were separated. And so we were going into the Women's Army Corps because there was still a Women's Army Corps in those days. And she ends up going to Fort Jackson, and I end up going to Fort McClellan. And so we were really upset that we weren't going to go together.
Well, yeah, that's what the buddy program was supposed to be about. Yeah.
Exactly. So my father and her mother, they went in to see the lieutenant colonel that was there at the reception station, as they were called in those days. Now they're called MEPS or maybe something else even. But they went in there to see him, and they had said that they could nullify our contract. And because we did sign up to go in under the buddy plan. So my girlfriend and I, we got together, we huddled, and we decided now we were going to go. We were going to meet back up in our advanced training courses. We had signed up to go into finance, and he suckered me into finance, as recruiters do sucker people into certain career fields, because they needed finance specialists in those days.
Right.
And he told me that I'd be working with the biggest computer in all of Department of Defense. And I'm like, wow, that is so cool. Well, I never saw the computer, needless to say, but I did work with it. So we went in January of 76. I went to Fort McClellan as a member of the Women's Army Corps, and she went to Fort Jackson as a member of the regular Army. So
what was your impression of Fort McClellan when you got there?
We got there in the dead of night. So my impression was not really a good one that night because it was so dark. So we went in, we got toothbrushes or whatever it is that they hand out when you get off your bus. And we went in and we just went to bed. But the next day, we went down and we got our clothing and did all those in-process things that they do, as they march to make us soldiers out of civilians. We got our clothing. And my impression of Fort McClellan was there was two things that really stuck out for me that day. This is January 7th, or maybe 8th in this time, 1976. First of all, it smelled like oil because they were redoing a roof. And that smell was nauseating. It was awful. So that was my first impression. It was a pretty negative one. My second impression was more of like a child's impression where, wait, I'm in the South. I came here from the North. I thought it was supposed to be warm, and I thought it was supposed to be sunny all the time. But it wasn't. I mean, it was dark when it got dark in upstate New York, and it was cold, not as cold as it was in New York, but, it was chilly enough to have to wear jackets and gloves and stuff. So, my first impressions were eye-opening. They were my first two impressions. My next impression, once we started to do the unit cohesion thing, was diversity. Because we didn't have diversity in upstate New York. Everybody looked like us.
Right.
And so I go there and there's people that look like they're from Eastern countries, and there's people that spoke different languages, or even people that weren't even Christians. Well, I didn't even know any Jewish people in those days. So we had some Jewish people, we had some brown colored people there, we had Black people there. That was my first, that I'm aware of, initiation into, or not initiation, but awareness of gay people existing, where the woman who had the bunk next to mine was gay. And I didn't even really know what that really meant. So that was in my basic training itself. I thought was pretty rigorous. I guess I was a so-so recruit. And, I did okay on the rifle range. I did okay, with all the PTs. I graduated and at the end of the end of March, because we had eight weeks of basic training those days. And I went ahead and graduated then, and then headed off to my advanced individual training.
Did women in the military, did they have to get haircuts too
No.
when they would first get there, or they were allowed to wear their hair?
No. So women in the military in those days, it was interesting. As I later found out, the woman who was our drill sergeant, she was, I thought, in my opinion, first of all, very scary, because she was so demanding. But she also was not the type of woman who would believe that, women had to fit a certain look or a certain stereotype. The military order of that day for women was that you could have longer hair, sort of. I mean, it could be even, mine was even longer than that, but it had to be up off your collar. So we women were wearing it up in buns, and we would braid it and stuff like that. We had a male drill sergeant within our company, and he made the women wear makeup. Well, we didn't have to wear makeup in our platoon. We didn't have to wear makeup. And that was not a requirement. There was a thing about earrings, they couldn't be dangly, certain jewelry. In those days, you weren't supposed to have tattoos or have them showing anyhow.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was, basically what the woman's portion of it was. We were not forced to get our hair cut.
A lot of rules, though, it seems like.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the military for you.
Yeah, military, right.
Yeah, yeah.
So how long were you at Fort McClellan for?
So I was at Fort McClellan for 8 weeks.
8 weeks,
okay. 8 weeks. I loved the drills. That I just loved to do the drills. And I wish that we had like a drill team here locally, that maybe some of us older people could participate in, even younger people. I think it would be amazing, to have a drill team actually march in some of the parades or something. But I love the drills. I hated the PT. And I didn't mind the ironing. Otherwise, I am a lazy person, and I didn't like having to make my bed every morning and make it so tight, even though I had to do it at home when I was growing up. But, I still didn't like to do it. I didn't really like the regimented part of it that well. I came to appreciate it later on in my life. Yeah. But during those days, oh my God, I didn't like it at all. Not at all.
Because I was at Fort McClellan in '76 for MP school, and 3 things that stood out for me there was this play. It was the 1-2-3 club that junior enlisted would go to dance and hang out, and then the other one was they had the boxing tournaments there. So a lot of people would come in and watch the boxing tournaments because that was a big thing. And the female soldiers in their barracks, as you're walking in or marching in formation, they're yoo-hoo, hey you, stuff like that, trying to get your attention. So those are my big 3 memories from Fort McClellan.
That's really funny. Now, that wouldn't have been me, waving at you, yoo-hoo, yoo-hoo. But I got to tell you, speaking about that 1-2-3 club, and other clubs, we were in basic training, so we were, at first we ran everywhere we went, and everything we did as a group. But I think it was after 6 weeks, they gave us a little more leniency. And so you could go do things, but there were certain things that you couldn't do, like you couldn't go off post. You couldn't go to the. Okay, so maybe this happened before we were not allowed, or before we were allowed to go to the club, because a girlfriend and I, we went to a club. We had, I don't know where we found these boys at, but maybe they were MPs. I don't know, Mike. Maybe it was you. Who knows?
Was it 76?
Yeah, maybe Mike is one of those ones that was, the influence on us young women.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she and I, for some reason, we found a couple of boys, and we ended up going to a club, and we went bowling. And we weren't supposed to, but we did it anyhow. And, so we were kind of a little bit of rebels.
I don't know. The dancing part of the reason that always kind of stuck with me is because in the military, everything is so structured. Yeah. And that's kind of like that little time where you're allowed to just kind of cut loose.
Yeah, right.
And be yourself because... wow, I loved it there myself too. So
yeah.
So where did you go after Fort McClellan?
So then after Fort McClellan, we went to. Interestingly, Fort McClellan is not an active Army base any longer. It's been turned over to the Alabama National Guard. From there, I went to Fort Ben Harrison, which is no longer an active Army base. I think maybe I ought not go to Army bases anymore because it seems they close down after I leave them. But I went to Fort Ben Harrison, was trained as a finance specialist, did very well there. I enjoyed my time there. I got in a little bit of trouble there. This was not of my making. I was not the reason for this. There was a young man. Why is it always these boys? I don't know. But there was a young man who had a crush on me. So he came into our barracks and he comes up the stairs and he's yelling my name, Phyllis, Phyllis. And he comes up to our floor. He opens the door and he yells out my name. So he wasn't supposed to do that. So our company commander calls him in and he had to go paint rocks or something. And he calls me in and I denied I knew the guy. I thought I was doing him a favor. And eventually I said, oh, I really didn't know him. I'm sorry, I lied. But it was too late. I ended up with stairwell duty, meaning I had to clean the stairwells with a toothbrush.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I did that. I loved my time at Fort Ben Harrison. I had a great time there. I had a wonderful time. I mean, we were there for about another 8 weeks. That was our training period at Fort Ben Harrison. Yeah, did very well in class. And
what were you learning? How to do like military payroll and stuff like that?
Basically, this is how my connection to the computer came into play. Everything in those days was done manually, actually. And they had what they called 5 cards. And they were, like, I don't know, maybe 6-inch square, maybe, cards. And you actually filled them out. There was a first block and you filled it either full the way in or you filled it diagonally in one way or whatever way you filled it in was indicative of what you wanted to have done with that person's payroll, right? And so you filled in that first block and then you filled in all the other pertinent information and then you submit them. And I honest to God, I don't know how they got to Fort Ben Harrison or what happened after we filled them in. All I know is that at the end of the day, we had stacks of these, what we called 5 cards. We had stacks of those and they went somewhere and they did something. So I never did see the computer there either. And that wasn't quite right. Maybe that's why I was such the rebel.
When we were talking in the office yesterday, I'd asked you about when you're in basic training and you get your first paycheck, you don't really get a first full paycheck and they have you sign. So do you remember what that was?
So what I remember about basic training is when we first got there, they gave us what we called casual pay.
Casual pay.
Yes, and it was like a half a paycheck. Yeah. And then when you got your first full paycheck or over the course of paychecks, maybe they recouped that money. That's what I remember.
So you were like, you received it and then you started going in and then you had to start collecting it? When you started working on the admin end of finance or no? Is that not what you did? For the like the pay stubs and stuff like that?
Yes. So if it was a collection of the casual pay,
right?
For example, then we would fill out a 5 card, and what we did, what we did on that 5 card would indicate what was going to happen. So in some cases, because I worked in and out processing in my permanent duty station, it was actually dispersing casual pay and it was also recouping any casual pay.
So Kathy says they give you money and then they take it back?
Well, they give you money, but what it is basically in advance of your pay. And you can request casual pay, or you could in those days, for other reasons. So let's say that you had a family emergency. You could request a casual payment.
Good morning, Janice. Thank you for joining us today. She said they give you $100 and then they take back 99. So
yeah. So I don't remember the amount, and maybe Janice, I don't know what your age is, but it could have been $100. Back in 76 when we got ours, it could have been. I know that to me it seemed like a lot of money.
Right.
Yeah.
Back then, yeah.
Oh yeah, that's more than I worked as a printer's aide before that, and to make $100 a week was pretty darn good. That's like $10 an hour.
She says that she wants to go, but they won't let her go.
Oh yeah, I know that one too. That I remember that as a Jody call.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love some of my Jody calls, actually. I remember a few of them. Yeah. Yep. So anyhow, from Fort McClellan, or from Fort Ben Harrison.
Fort Ben.
Yes. My permanent duty. So my best friend and I, we met back up in Fort Ben Harrison. She was and still is of a little sounder mind than I am. She would not go along with me in this lie to the company commander. She told me, hey, you're on your own, have fun, cleaning the stair steps with a toothpick, or a toothpaste, or toothbrush rather,
Right.
and never, never defend a boy again. That's what, never do that again. So anyhow, after AIT, then we're thinking we're going to go together because we're still in the buddy system, right?
Right.
Well, she goes to Fort Stewart in Georgia, and I go to Fort Gordon in Georgia. So we're like, I'm not sure how far it is, like 150 miles away from each other or something like that. And so when we contacted the recruiter, because we're still wondering what the heck happened here, he said, yeah, but you're not that far apart, you guys can see each other there. So anyhow, he was still in the picture to a degree as far as we were concerned, and we got together while we were both at our permanent duty station. Yeah.
So much for the buddy program, though, huh?
Yeah, so much for the buddy program. Yeah. But they did, to their credit, they did agree to nullify our contract that we had signed with the Army. And, we decided, we're just going to go for it anyhow. And that's what we did. Yeah.
See what adventures are out there waiting.
Yes.
So where did you go after Fort Bend?
So that's when I went to Fort Gordon in Georgia.
Oh, that's right. You did say that.
Yes, and that was my permanent duty station. So I started off there working in the in and out processing branch. And that's, I alluded to this before, we would in-process people. This is back in the day when you actually, as finance specialists, you went somewhere with a stack of 5 cards, basically, and you in-processed people. They stood here before you, and you in-process them as far as, they're paying their casualty pay and getting them into the system. That was concerned. It was truly hands-on in those days. And I remember, what I remember anyhow, is one of the places that we went, it was an old building. Our offices were in old buildings for that matter, but this was very old barracks building, and they might have even been living in them. I don't know, but it was so dark in there. It was just dark and
not good for the eyes, huh?
Not really, but you're young, you don't care,
Yeah.
I just recall it being dark and just kind of old, Yeah. And so, and then I worked in and out processing for a while, and I was pretty involved in the extracurricular activities. I was on the volleyball team. We played softball. Right. I was a bowler.
You bowled?
Oh yeah. I could bowl an 80 with the best of them.
Wow.
Yeah. No, actually, I got to be okay. Okay is I guess.
It's fun though, isn't it? Going out on league night or whatever, and having fun with your friends.
Oh yeah. So we had a little group of people from our office that we would bowl together, and that's what we would do. And so then. Sorry, I need a drink of coffee.
Okay. It's
now I wish I had brought water too, Mike.
Oh.
But anyhow, so we had a bowling team there. I was on the bowling team. We used to go to Clarks Hill Lake. I don't know if anybody here was at Fort Gordon, but if you were, you certainly went to Clarks Hill Lake because that's where all of us young people went. It was a dam, and the Army had a morale, welfare, and recreation area out there with cabins and mobile homes, and they rented boats and skis, and you could get fishing gear, had all sorts of really cool stuff out there. And in the summer times, we spent a lot of time at Clark Hill Lake getting sunburnt, which they told us we weren't supposed to do. They said it was against the law in the Army or whatever it is.
Right.
To get a sunburn. But, it seems like everybody was getting sunburn anyhow out there. Being kids that we are. But yeah, we did a lot of extracurricular things. And so, thank you so much.
Kathy to the rescue.
Yeah, Kathy to the rescue. Thank you, Kathy. So anyhow, I mentioned that I was on the bowling team, and this is where life in the military took a really dark twist for me, because I was on the bowling team, and after
Okay.
bowling, a whole bunch of us, we always went out afterwards.
Right.
I mean, it's just what people, they still do. You go out dancing and you go out afterwards,
Yep.
you go eat, you go do something, you sit, you hang out with whoever you're with. So we went to a friend's house, and we were all there, partying. I did not drink in those days. I had The reason for that is interesting. It was something my father instilled in me when I turned 18 and spent the first half of my 18th year in a drunken stupor, and he told me I didn't have to. And then I thought, I guess I don't. So I really didn't drink. And we had beer frames that night, and
Yes.
I had like 6 Pepsi sitting in front of me. So that was what I drank, and I didn't do any illicit drugs. I didn't smoke marijuana. I didn't do anything.
Well, you were active duty. You were not supposed to do illicit drugs.
Please. Yeah, well, we're still people. So
Yes.
anyhow, we go to this party, and they are smoking pot and they are drinking. So I could have got a contact high. I don't know, but I was going to get a ride home because I didn't have a vehicle in those days with one of the guys on the bowling team with us. And this was not uncommon. But he decided he wasn't going to take me home. We were at his house, and he raped me. And so the next day, I went to the MP station, and I reported this rape. And because it happened off post, they called in the sheriff, and they took me down to the sheriff's station where I had to file a report down there. The sheriff agreed to let the Army prosecute the case. It went to trial,
Okay.
and he was found not guilty.
Oh, you're kidding me.
No, it was devastating. It was devastating.
What was his rank? I'm just curious.
He was
higher enlisted?
He was higher enlisted.
Okay.
Yes. He was either an E5 or an E6, and I was an E2.
Okay.
So, because I was basically just out of training. I had just got there. I'd been maybe there for, let's see, I got there in May, and this happened in June. And I had just turned 19 in May. So anyhow, we went to court, and this is something that you really don't expect happens.
Nope.
When you go to court, you don't expect the people in your chain of command to turn against you.
No.
And that's exactly what happened. And I remember getting called in to the company commander's office, the battalion commander's office, and basically being told that I had done the wrong thing, that I should have let them take care of this. And, I just didn't know.
Right.
So I didn't really care at that point.
It's not like you have a guidebook or anything that comes with it when you're a victim of MST. So
it doesn't make sense to me, to tell you the truth. When somebody commits a crime, you don't report it. That I grew up, you report it to the police. Right. That's what the police are there for. Right. And
that's
they take care of that. That's what I knew. I'm a newly minted 19-year-old, so basically just a child still. So we went to court. I have to tell you, though, that they made my life a living hell there.
They always do that for
they
the victims.
Did. They wouldn't promote me, so I remained an E2 until, I'm trying to even remember when. I think I had to remain an E2 for the entire year. So I didn't even get promoted to an E3, until the next year. And what was so really disheartening about this is that I was really good at what I did. I was a really good student. There was a woman that I was with, and she was neither of those. And I'm not saying that is a good thing or a bad thing. She just really wasn't either of those. And she got promoted, and I did not get promoted. And so that was a real blow to me. They would come into the barracks room. The barracks sergeant would come in there, and we would have our inspections. And in those days, I don't know if you remember, but the men wore the cleats on their heels, on their military shoes. And so he came in, and he gouged a hole in my floor. And then every time they came in to do an inspection, I would get demerits for that gouge on my floor, which meant that my privileges were taken away for that
revoked, yeah.
for that weekend or for whatever. You know, it was an awful experience. The best thing about it was a couple of things that were the best thing about it is number one, because I reported it, I was put into counseling immediately. And I had the most amazing counselor. I think she was a first lieutenant.
Wow.
And she was probably a newly minted psychologist or, whatever she happened to be. But she was just totally amazing and supportive and, really was so helpful in helping me through this period. She and my friends, I really can't say enough about them because they're the ones that gave me sanity and my family, because I'm from a very large, loving, very close family, and my extended family as well. So everybody was very supportive that needed to be supportive, with the exception of my roommate. We were living off post at the time, and when I went back and I told her that he had raped me, we actually slept together that night, and we had knives under our pillow because, he had threatened me when he dropped me off. Even before he dropped me off, he threatened my life. He actually threatened me while he was in the process of committing the rape. The thing about the rape, and I want all women to hear this, women, because this is, you get judged. That's just the way that we are with women who are raped. When I knew that I did not have the physical strength, because I'm 5 foot some odd half-inch tall, and I weighed maybe 110 pounds that day, and this guy was probably 5'8" and probably weighed 180. So he was taller and he was bigger. And I knew that I did not have the physical strength to harm him. And he was already harming me. He had already harmed me before the actual physical rape itself. And I tried everything to convince him to change his mind about what he was going to do. And he did not. When I realized that he was going to do this, regardless, I knew I was going to report him.
Uh-huh.
Because I knew that that's where my power was. That's really all I knew. And what was frightening is after he had finished raping me, he had said to me, "The white coats better not be coming to get me in the morning." And I took that to mean that I better not report him, and that he thought that if I reported him, he was going to be, incarcerated into a mental institution or something. That's my take on that. That's what I thought he was telling me. And he threatened me, and he threatened my family. I didn't know that he would have no idea who my family was, but I believed the guy. He just got done committing an awful crime against me. So I believe this guy. I believe what he's going to do. So anyhow, back to my roommate. I get home that night, and we put these butcher knives under our pillows in case he comes back. And we're looking out the window. I had her look out the window because I was afraid to. And she was saying that, she couldn't see him. She saw his car go away. I said, I think he's going to come back. And, we just didn't know. So the next day she said, "Are you going to report this?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Are you going to do this right now?" And I said, "I don't know," because I didn't know if I was able, emotionally to go do that right at that point. And so I went to work. Okay, so I want to back up just a little bit, okay? Because when I was a really good typist, and so the command sergeant major, the post command sergeant major, needed a secretary, and so they selected me to go be his secretary. So I was working in the command group of Fort Gordon in those days, at the base commander.
Right.
It was a General White in those days, and my command sergeant major that I was working for was Command Sergeant Major Souza. And
still remember the names, huh?
Oh yes, I remember them for very distinctive reasons. But anyhow, that's where I was working when this happened. And so when I showed up to work that day, I always got there before Command Sergeant Major did. I was always there very early in the morning, and I was there when he came in, and he looked at me, and he said, "What happened?" Or he said, is there something wrong?" or something like that. And I said, "Yes." And so he says, "Come on into my office." So I went into his office, and he put me at ease, told me to sit down. And no, he didn't tell me to sit down. He put me at ease. And so I'm still standing there in front of him. And he said, "What's going on?" And I told him what happened. And he said, "Oh, did you report this?" And I said, "I did." And he also said that he wishes that I had talked with him first, because I'm working for the command group, and it looked pretty bad for someone in the post commander's command group to be the victim of a rape. So, I just took that as that's the way that they handled those things in those days, and honestly didn't really think that much more about it. But the MPs came in shortly thereafter. And I remember there being 2 male MPs, and there might have even been a female MP that came with them, but I don't remember that. But I remember going down to the MP station, and there was a female MP there. So obviously at some point, by the time I got there in the morning, I had called the MPs. Or actually what I think happened is my girlfriend, we talked on the phone that morning, and she said, "Are you going to call?" And I said, "I am very scared." She said, "Do you want me to call for you?" And I said, "Yes." So she's the one who called. Yes. And so then they came over, and they took me down to the station, and, we started questioning and things like that. Now, the sad thing about all this, besides all of that, is that my best friend, my roommate's boyfriend, was a very good friend of the man who raped me. And so when it came time for trial, she testified against me. And
what?
Yeah, she testified against me. And it was so hard, because she was the one that was, kind of protecting me when I went home that night. And so that was really hard. She later wrote a letter of apology, and I had to accept it. It had already happened. It's already done. And she's got to get on with her life. And if it makes her, if this would really help her, to ask forgiveness, that's exactly what I did. As I just sent a letter back, and I said, of course I forgive you. So anyhow, that was basically the beginning of the end of my military career. Before that, I was gung-ho. I was fresh out of basic training and AIT, and I was going to be a lifer. I was gonna make it 20. They had made a soldier out of me. So from the time that I was raped, which was in June of 1976, so about 6 months after I went into the Army, and for the next year and a half because I served about 20 months altogether, before it became way too difficult to even finish out the remainder of my career. It became difficult. It became so...
I wonder why.
It became...
Being around everybody in uniform like that and having that happen to you, I can understand.
Well, also it was humiliating, because back in those days, women were looked at a different way if they reported being raped. And that's why a lot of women still to this day
don't do it.
Don't report it, because we're the ones that are made out to be, the instigator of it. And all we are just regular people doing regular people things, and some person decides that they're going to commit a crime against us, and women, if you're listening to me, this is not your fault. This is not your fault. This is the fault of the rapist. What happened to me afterwards is the fault of the military.
Right.
And the regulations and the policies, written and unwritten, that go into how we treat women and men, by the way, who are subjected not just to rape. Now, they have a term called military sexual trauma. Military sexual trauma these days, it covers a bunch of things. It covers a rape, which is a penetration. It covers sexual assault. It covers a sexual assault which can be coercive, but does not include penetration. It can be treating a person in such a derisive manner sexually, like, oh, look at your ass, or, look
right.
at, things like that.
Derogatory comments like that.
Or it can be creating the hostile work environment. And this is more common than people actually imagine. And this goes both ways for men and women, by the way. But anyhow, so those are the things that are included under the umbrella these days of military sexual trauma. So, what happened the day after I reported the rape is I lost my job at the command sergeant major's office as a secretary, which made sense, because I was going to be involved in the court case and, back and forth to the police and the sheriff. And the sheriff then agreed to let the military handle this case. So basically it was just the MPs that I dealt with, my social worker and the lawyers. They were the primary people I was involved with in those days. So they sent me back to finance. When they sent me back to finance, they put me in a place where they put problem employees. So now...
That's not right.
No, but that's what they do.
Yeah.
So I worked we call it the PFR bank. It was personnel file records, and it was bins they were probably about 3 feet deep, and they were long, and they had every soldier's military finance record in there. And I'm short, so I can't really reach into those bins. So my performance appraisals are very poor. And eventually they end up giving me a stool because I complained long enough so I could get a stool to reach in there. And then because I'm now a problem child within finance and actually, other places within Fort Gordon, they decided that they're going to banish me from finance. And so they asked me, do you want to be on the pistol team? Well, I never shot pistol. I shot rifle,
right,
because we were hunters where I grew up, but I never had ever fired a pistol. But I said, yeah, I'll do it. So I went out and I was on the pistol team and I loved it. I had a wonderful time on the pistol team, and I was there. It was a competition pistol team, and it was part of TRADOC. And we went to actually the championship matches, and I did really bad. But it was fun, and I had a wonderful time there. By the time I went back to finance, then they decided there was a gentleman there who ran the cashier station, and he had 2 female higher level civilian employees. These are all civilians in these working these in these days. So Mr. Paculus, he was the head of that section. And then there were 2 other women in the GS structure. They would have been GS 8s that were in charge of these 2 other little teams. Well, they convinced Mr. Paculus to bring me on as a cashier. And so Mr. Paculus did, and he was awesome. And those 2 women were awesome. And then I got to work right next to one of my very good friends.
There are good people in the world.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, I mean, that was one bad person,
right.
And if I go out and I
but
look
his actions, though,
that's
the thing.
that's the military, and I'm not so sure that it's changed that much. And it's not just the military. You can go into anywhere. You go into a corporation, and you have corporation ethics. And what people need to do is they have to protect the image. That's really what they have to do. And so to throw stuff under the bus or people under the bus is sometimes the way that they need to do it.
Well,
So
it's horrible though. I mean,
so anyhow, Mike, I want to make a point here too. Okay, so after 20 months or however long it was, I didn't finish my 36 months. When they wouldn't let me go on vacation, because then they said I had to take this flu shot or swine flu shot or bird flu or whatever it was during those days. They wouldn't let me go on leave. What they would do is, you remember charge of quarters, where
yes.
at the end of the day,
CQ?
yeah, CQ, you'd have to close up, the laundry rooms and the day rooms and do all sorts of stuff and, close the barracks down for the night. I used to get assigned that over every holiday. That was part of my punishment for being raped.
See, that's kind of weird because I didn't think an E2 could be a CQ.
Well, I was an E2. Right. I was an E2, and then eventually I was an E3. And I mean, and that's as high as I got.
Right.
That's where they got me to. I was scheduled to be the E4, but I got out right before they gave me the 4. So anyhow, one night I'm there and I go into the day room. It's about 10 till 10. There's still people using the laundry room. And I go into the day room and I told the folks in there if they had anything in the laundry, they had to come and they had to, take it out. And that's just standard. That's just standard. And Kathy, I'm going to tell you your question. I'm going to tell you something about that in a minute. But anyhow, this one gentleman, okay, so this guy's been in for 19 years and he's an E2. So, but he'd been to Vietnam.
Okay.
And so, and he was an alcoholic. So, these guys, and I don't blame them, they get a pass. If you were in Vietnam, they would just keep you in. And this is still Vietnam era, when I went in. So there were a lot of people just coming out of Vietnam.
Right.
And they had all sorts of issues even then. Well, this man decided that I need to be taught a lesson, that I cannot tell other people what to do, because I'm an E2, I'm a woman, and besides, I had charged rape against one of his friends. So he comes out and he's tall and he's skinny, but the guy is strong, and he grabs me around my neck and he lifts me up off the floor and he starts to choke me. So there's other people in the day room that come out and I'm kicking at him. I mean, I'm 5 foot something. He's 6 foot tall. I mean, and he has me off the floor and I'm kicking at him. And the people come out from the day room and they pull him off of me, and nothing ever happened to him after that.
Obviously.
Yeah. Well, this has caused all sorts of issues. I mean, I had nightmares. I would walk in my sleep. I remember having this awful nightmare one night, and I woke up hiding out in a stall in the bathroom. I remember one time waking up next to my boyfriend's van. And, I'm like, how am I getting here? And so that was frightening to me,
right.
That I'm having these nightmares and everything. I had moved back to the barracks by this time. So back to the pistol team. So I'm on the pistol team. And I guess that was like, I don't know, 7 months or something. I don't really know how long it took. But anyhow, I was on there for quite a while. When they sent me back to finance working in as a teller, it was still unbearable. And so I worked there, I guess, for about 6 months. Not Mr. Paculus. I was promoted to an E3 during those days. He was going to push for my E4, and that's where we were at when I finally said that I had enough. And Kathy, that is when I decided that I had had enough. It was when I got back into finance and I'm working the teller, and I was still having repercussion from my customers who would come in, and I had this one man. he showed me this photo. When I asked for his ID, he showed me a photo that was so disturbing that I almost fell off my chair.
Right.
And I called for Mr. Paculus to come over. And so, and
Where does behavior like this come from?
I don't know.
Jeez.
I don't know. But this man, he had me in tears. That photo was so disturbing. It was. I don't even know what it was, but it was the most gruesome thing I've ever seen, and it was supposed to be a woman, I think. And so I said to him, as Mr. Paculus is coming over, I said, that's awful. That's not you. I said, that's an awful picture.
Right.
And he said, well, I'm going to tell my wife. That's a picture of my wife. And I'm like, no, I'm really not. I mean, anyhow, so Mr. Paculus came over, and they called the MPs, actually, and the MPs came, and, and they ushered the man out. But I was subjected to that sort of behavior for the remainder of my military career. And so I got out, and I decided that I needed to take a break, and I moved back home to my little town in upstate New York, where everybody knows everybody, and I had a huge, extended, loving family, many childhood friends.
That had to help.
It helped a lot. My parents let me move back in with them. I had to get a job, so I went back working in the printing company that I was working in before I went into the Army. Those people were amazing. Their names were the Krosniaks. And Mrs. Krosniak, she was my guardian angel for my entire life. I remained in contact with her until, her death, actually. And she actually came out here to visit me in Arizona. I lived in D.C. for a little while. She came and visited me.
That's sweet.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, and when I would go back home, I would go to visit her.
For somebody to do that they care.
They do. Yeah. She was my champion. Champion. And I can't tell you how much she has influenced, how the ways that I went in my life. So, we do influence people whether we know it or not. And when we're young, like I was at the time, we are being influenced by people, whether we know it or not. When you're old, like I am now, we do influence people, whether we realize it or not. And so I moved back home, went to work in the printing plant. After about a year and working through a lot of emotional stuff with my family and still with the VA, they were super helpful. Then I decided I was going to move. And when I was 13, I had this vision that I was going to move to the desert. And so here I am now, 20. I'm 20 years old, and I decided I'm going to move to the desert. And the only desert that I was aware of was here, because I had an aunt that lived her husband lived in Tombstone, and they ended up there because he was military.
Right.
And then, so I ended up moving out here, not because they lived here, but because another aunt moved out here. And so I moved out here to be close to her, and I've been out here ever since.
Well, Janice said that she is sorry that happened to you. And then Kathy said that, do you think this was a habit for him? Just thinking the impunity that was so obvious there would make it easy to abuse for him.
Yes.
And thank you for reporting him.
You're welcome, Kathy. And that's a really good question. And yeah, I do believe that this was not the first time. Why do I believe that? Because when, like I told you, he was my ride home. When everybody was leaving, I got up to leave with them as well. And he said, no, I want to talk to you a little bit. And I said, okay. So they left. I noticed he locked the door, and I thought that was very odd. But, I really didn't give it a whole heck of a lot of thought. But I'm sitting on the couch. He had a little dog. I had the dog on my lap, and I'm petting the dog and everything. And then he says, that he needs someone to take care of his dog because he was going to go to Mississippi or wherever he was from to visit, take a chair to his grandmother. This ended up being part of nightmares later on for me. He's going to take this rocking chair to his grandmother. And so And I said, okay, well, I can't because I don't have a vehicle. And so, we started talking about his visiting his grandmother with his rocking chair or whatever. And he kind of slides over closer to me on the couch. And I kind of slide more over towards,
Away
I'm by
from
the
him.
wall,
Right.
I'm by the wall. So, Mike, if you're me, this is the way that we were seated. And so I start sliding over closer to the wall. And he comes closer over to me and he puts his arm around my back like he wants to kiss me. And I said, no, I just
No
want
means no.
I said, I just want to go home. I said, no, you're my friend. I don't want to kiss you. And I just take me home now. Well, then he had reached down between the cushions of his sofa and he had pulled out this hanger that he had straightened out. And that was his weapon. And that's what he put around my neck and choked me with.
Oh my gosh.
And I mean, and it was more than that. But so, Kathy, to answer your question, I know that this is a habit for him because the hanger, for one thing, what was it doing there in the first place? And number two, during the court, this woman, I didn't even know during the trial, she came and spoke on behalf of the prosecution, which was the state actually, and I was their primary witness because that's how trials go, that she said that he had done the same thing to her. Remember, we were all friends. And so they were going to go to Clark Hill Lake. And he said, I need to stop by my house. This is her story now, and pick up my swimming trunks. And she said, okay. So they stopped by there and he invited her in and she went in. And then he tried to attack her. Now, this was a bigger woman. And so the lawyer says, well, what did you do? And she said, I knocked the shit out of him. And I'm like, hey, good for you. At least somebody did. So I was really happy to hear that somebody had taken him physically on, before that. So, yeah, he was habitual. He was a habitual offender. Did he do it again? I don't know. I don't know because...
Yeah, how do you find out, especially if you left the area?
This is why, my friends all went to Germany. That's where we were all going as a unit after Fort Gordon, right? Well, I was not allowed to go with them because he was going there. So they wouldn't allow me to go with him. So anyhow, and that's when it started, where I started doing the out-processing thing, where I knew that this was just not going to work for me here.
Would you say that the military has gotten better, though, at handling military sexual trauma, or?
There's more of an awareness now. Are we better at handling it? If I look at the statistics, no. Is it made? Are people more knowledgeable about it now? Yeah, I think so. But when I look at the statistics, and there's a woman up here on Fort Huachuca, she worked with my sister at Fort Hood. I think that she actually has a program up there for the soldiers. And she might have more insights on that than I would.
Right.
But I know that this results in the outlay of millions of dollars to the taxpayer. Not just millions. It's probably over the course. I've been receiving compensation now since 1976. So if I can figure out how much one person has received over the course of these past almost 50 years, and then multiply that by the hundreds of thousands of people who are receiving stuff for military sexual trauma, then we know that this is causing the taxpayers an enormous financial burden. And so since it seems like it's harder for the institutions to hold themselves responsible.
But doesn't it seem like more and more women soldiers were coming forward, and isn't like the DNA testing and stuff like that and rape kits and all that, isn't that so much more advanced than it was back then? I would think it would be a lot more easier to prosecute these people.
No, it's not, because it's not. The reason that it's not, Mike, it's not easy to prosecute a rape because the bottom line
I know it's not easy to prosecute
because the bottom line is always the bottom line. It's always a he said, she said.
Right.
Or I don't even want to say he said, she said, because sometimes it's male on male. I've never heard of a female on female, although I'm sure it's happened. But it's always the perpetrator, the perpetrator's word, which is usually a he, against the victim's word, which is usually a she still. Right. Although there is an interesting statistic on that. Although the majority of military sexual trauma victims, and I hate to use that word, but we are, that are victimized by a rapist are women, only 10% report it. 40% of men who claim to be the victims of military sexual trauma, they report it. And now remember that this has changed a lot from 50 years ago when I went through something like this, where military sexual trauma is now a bigger umbrella than just the physical sexual assault. So it's not. It doesn't mean just rape. It doesn't mean just sodomy. It doesn't mean just coercion. It means a physical assault. In other ways, it means, and also emotional. In an emotional abuse, creating an environment that's hostile for people to work in and things of that nature. So yeah, that's it. But I know that we're at the hour mark here, Mike. Yeah. So I want to wrap this up, but I do want to say one thing. Women, I'm going to give you a phone number, okay?
Please do.
I want to give you this phone number because one of the things that we've done as a country, or as the Veterans Affairs, is that we have said if you're a victim of military sexual trauma, and that's that big umbrella, or PTSD, or anything like that, but I'm going to focus on military sexual trauma, right, that you can seek counseling even if you have never filed a claim, even if you never filed a lawsuit, even if nobody has ever known about this except for you and your perpetrator. You need to call this number. This is the Tucson VA number for the military sexual trauma unit, all right? And they will set up an appointment and you can go in and you can talk. You need to talk to these people. I'm telling you, you need to talk to these people. And then you need to come and see me at the DAV and let me help you process a claim, okay? All right, so the number, be ready, is... And you can go back and you can actually listen to this again. But the number at the VA Mental Health Clinic, and you can Google it and get it, 520-629-4884. So call them and then come and see us at the DAV, okay? And we can take it from there. And know that we at the DAV, we're not counselors. We don't really have the knowledge and the training to assist you as you work through, your trauma. But we can actually help you file the claim. So please come and see us, all right?
Well, Phyllis, I will also ask Kathy to put that number in the header too, so that when people go through to look for the interview, that phone number will be up in the header up there, so that way they'll have a number they can refer to without having to go back and. But thank you so much for your sharing your story. I would love for you to come back sometime at a later date if you would. I'd like to. I have so many more questions I'd like to ask you, about the DAV and hobbies and all that other kind of stuff, but we'll
all right.
We'll do that another time.
Okay, the things we didn't get to today, right, Mike?
Yeah, things we didn't get to today.
You didn't know I was going to go off on
Phyllis
that.
Part 2.
Yeah.
No, it's good. That's why we wanted you to come down, because, again, we want our veterans sharing their story. Okay. It's important to the Warrior Healing Center, and it's important to our community to know these stories. I fully believe that.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Mike. I was really glad to be able to share this. I think that the more information that we get out there on this, the better off that we will be as a society, and let's just start holding people responsible who do things that are irresponsible and illegal.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike.
I appreciate your time coming in.
You betcha.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you again next Friday.
Okay. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.